So for my cooler water pellet fishing when I'm targeting skimmers, it couldn't be easy when it comes to what I'm going to feed. I've got 2mm micro pellets and some 4mm expanders as well. When it comes to preparing my 2mm pellets, simply all I do is fill my bait tub up. You're probably only going to need a pint for this sort of session. That's probably going to be way too much, to be honest. But a pint of micro pellets and just cover them level with the water. And then all I've done is just let that water absorb into my pellets. So I've got a nice soft pellet all the way through. It's easy for the fish to digest and it'll make it lighter when fishing on the bottom for the skimmers to pick it up. The other bait is 4mm expander pellets, and all I've done is I've pumped these so that I can also feed them as well as them pellets fall through, they fall through nice and slowly. And then all I do is I preserve them by keeping in water. Reason for this is if any start to float to the surface, I can just get rid of them. But as I've got them now in water, I know that every single pellet is sinking. When I'm deciding what bait I'm going to feed, well, to start my session I want to try and hold some fish. So micro pellets, being that smaller 2mm size, is a great holding bait. The problem is when it comes to fishing in 9 foot of water, how can you feed them every single chuck without foul looking fish and stuff? That's where the 4mm expanders come in. I can loose feed 4mm expanders, and what that'll do is it'll have a bit of bait falling through, which will encourage the fish to follow it down to the bottom and also allow me to target that better stamp of skimmers. So for me personally, when it comes to feeding my micro pellets, I like to sprinkle them out and create a bigger area for the fish to graze over. When you sprinkle your bait through, your bait is actually drawing the fish in as well. They can see it fluttering through the water. I'm not a massive fan of feeding balls of micros. I think it keeps your area really small and it sinks too quick. So for me, that's how I like to feed my micros. In addition to feeding my micro pellets, how often should I do it? Well, it all depends how good the fishing is. Sometimes I'll look to feed once, catch 2 or 3 fish off it. Other days that won't work and you'll have to feed every single chuck. But if you have to feed every single chuck in deep water with micro pellets, it can then lead to line bites. So you've got to try and work out the feeding pattern. To start with, I'll feed them every single chuck. As soon as I start getting fish in my peg, then I'll start to work out how often I can get away without feeding them to try and keep the fish settled on the bottom. So if I start getting some funny bites on my micro pellets, that's when the 4mm come into it. Pinging these expanders is a great way of spreading the fish out and having bait falling through your peg, which allows you to try and attract the better stamp. When it comes to how many of them you feed, it just depends how deep it is. Generally when it's deeper, you can feed a little bit more. When I say a little bit more, might feed a dozen pellets every chuck. If the venue's a little bit shallower, then sometimes only feeding 4 or 5 can be really good. So you've just got to work out on the day how good the fishing is, how deep it is will dictate as well how many you'll feed. Sometimes you might feed them twice every chuck, sometimes you might just feed once every chuck. So that's what you've got to work out, and it all depends on the venue you're actually fishing.